All right, so here we're at one of our clients where we kind of have a homestead project. We're looking at a diverse orchard site on acreage, and they've dedicated a little portion of that acreage to a diversified fruit growing, medicine growing, pollinator attracting orchard. Now, the uniqueness of this is that it is in the middle of deer country, so there's a lot of deer pressure. So we've done a lot of experimenting, and we're also looking at ways to manage the water here on this site. So as you can see, let's start with water management, because that's where so many of our projects really need to begin. We've got these two nice berms that have been dug out, and as you can see in berms like this, the really important thing is that they are not too steep of a grade that they can't get the tractor in. So they're still able to come in and get the tractor right up to the edge of the berm here, which is really, really important. There are so many books and videos and pictures out there on the internet about berms and swales within the edible landscaping and permaculture context, and we have found that to be really problematic when walking around steep edges, when using mowers, when using any piece of equipment for that matter. We want our edges to be really nice and smooth, so that's a really important consideration. We've got an article on the Foodscaper that documents and shows pictures of how exactly we did this in progress. So that's one really important thing. If we pan behind you a little bit, Lindsay, we can see that this whole watershed that we're standing in above this first berm, all of this water that hits the road and this whole hillside here, it all hits this first berm that I am standing on, and it settles in this swale. And this swale slowly takes water all the way that way, where eventually it hits another diversion swale and ends up back into the woods. So we're trying to take water that would otherwise flow directly downhill and make it take the longest path possible to get eventually down to the pond, which is in the woods. That way we get as much infiltration where the rain falls as we can before it ends up in the pond there. So that's the water piece. The other piece is the deer piece. How are we managing with deer? Well, in this young orchard, we're kind of, let's look at this. This is a good example. Here we have an Iranian almond, and so we've planted the almond and we've got this fence, and what we're doing in this deer context is ensuring that the plant gets a good 5-6 feet tall before we let it do all of its branching, and we want to make sure that we can keep the deer off of it this way. In this particular case, we've got a really tight deer fence here, because if we were to have a really big deer fence, the bigger the fence, the harder it is to manage the weeds at the base of the tree, because it's, as you can see here, like if I wanted to pull this yarrow, which I don't, it would be really hard. So the bigger the deer fence, the more management and troubles you have managing weeds inside of that deer fence. One of the things is that we've done here is just plant tons of herbaceous perennials that are still very young and small, and we're trying to get feedback on a lot of things that we've read, but we don't know for sure, are they going to get deer browsed? We've found that yarrow, which is one of the many, many spreading perennials that we've planted here, it does not get deer browsed. We love it. You can make medicine from it. It's you can eat the young greens in the spring, and it attracts all kinds of pollinators. So we're seeing that with things like yarrow. And then if we come further down here, you can see that we planted, these are Egyptian walking onions. So we planted just like 3 of these walking onion plants in the spring, or I'm sorry, last fall. And then we harvested some of the bulbils, and then we planted out a bunch of the bulbils here. And then next year, we'll take those bulbils, which are kind of like an above ground seed, kind of like garlic, and we can just stick them in the ground and continue to expand this patch. We've got a patch of perennial onions then that's not getting deer browsed. We can kind of see, like, it's really important in these cases to be mindful. We had a branch that came out of this fence here. This is a mulberry, and I think it's Cucusa mulberry. And this branch had come out and it got deer browsed. So we're constantly, as we come and do these quarterly maintenance visits, we're helping to keep the trees inside of the fences till they get a bit taller and thicker, and then we can start to remove the fences as the trees become really well established. So we've got the water, we got the plants. The third thing is weed management. Now, weed management at this scale is incredibly challenging. What do we do with all these berms? Well, as soon as we made the berms, we first came in and put down a huge dose of mulch. Now, out here in the country, we have access to big straw bales and wood chip piles that are readily accessible. Behind you, if we pan down there later, or maybe we can take a picture, you can see there's a big old round straw bale. So as soon as we made the berm, we got the straw laid down, and we have used that to continually suppress the weeds. Now, if you do not have a lot of access to organic material, then this is not a great weed management strategy. But because we have access to to organic matter that we can use to cover the soil every few months and continue to suppress the weeds, this has worked out really well. The other piece of weed management is choosing all different kinds of herbaceous perennials that are going to continue to spread and compete with weeds. Things like the yarrow, things like the walking onions. We've got mint. We've got a variety of stinging nettle called less stinging nettle. We've got all these different spreaders that are going to help stand up to some of the weed competition as it presents itself. So that's kind of how we're managing weeds at this scale, and we feel like it's working pretty well. Another thing that we can't see very well is that we did sprinkle in a lot of white clover seed, and that white clover seed was looking amazing earlier in the year. Some of the dry time, I think in the summer, it's kind of petered out a little bit, and I'm interested to see if it's going to come back up. So I am seeing that a lot of it was mowed off, and it's really low right now, but we'll see if that proves to be a good alternative or a good green manure, a green pathway here in the swale, not on the berm. Like we can see this white clover right here was mowed off, and we can a lot of this, it may be just too wet in the swale for that white clover to be effective. So we're still learning about swale management here, but that's our homestead orchard here with deer and spreading perennials and water management. And let us know if you have any questions, and hopefully we can figure this out together.